Hey, thanks for tuning in and welcome to the Digital Book Club, where I plan on explaining key lessons I've learned from some of my favorite books. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about how this book in particular changed my financial life. We often talk about investing in a very boring sense, but actually investing for me has allowed me to do some very exciting things in my life. It's given me a lot of freedom, and I really think that when we talk about investing, that's what we should focus on more, is the freedom it gives you and the exciting things you can do as a result. I'm going to run through 8 key lessons all about getting money. We all want more of that, growing money, and then finally actually holding on to the money, so keeping that money. We're going to run through 8 top tips that will put you in a stronger financial position by the end of this video. These first lessons fall into the getting money section. And one of the key things Morgan talks about in his book is that how our own views on money are largely a result of our own experiences. So we go on to base a lot of our financial decisions on what we have experienced in the past or what has been shown to us, usually by parents, and that is going to affect how we invest our money. And to give you an example that illustrates this well, if you were born in the 1950s, then the stock market would have seemed like a waste of time. It wouldn't have gone anywhere in your teens or in your 20s. And so you would think it's a rubbish place to put your money. Why would anybody put money in the stock market? But if you were born in the 1960s, then the stock market would have gone up 3 times in your teens and in your 20s. So any money you had in would have, gone up by a multiple of 3. It gets even better because if you were born in the 70s, then the stock market went up 10 times, which is a huge return. So to people who were, born in the 70s and lived through that, they would think the stock market's the best place to put your money. The point is, you can see how all these groups would have, vastly different views on the importance of putting money into the stock market and whether or not it was worth it at all. The second lesson that Morgan goes on to talk about is how luck plays a huge role in money and investing returns. It isn't a, stop working hard and pray to get lucky, so sorry about that, you still have to work hard. It does go on to talk about how the returns that you get will largely depend on luck, as we just saw in that example. Based on where you were born, the stock market would have either done really well or really badly, and there's nothing you could have done. The major example that Morgan uses is how Bill Gates happened to attend one of the only schools at the time that had a computer. And so what you think is, well, without this, would Bill have gone on to create Microsoft? Unlikely. So, luck played a huge role in his success. The third lesson is, when is enough truly enough? Unfortunately, this isn't an issue I have experienced, but many people have. And one example in particular is a chap called Rajat Gupta, who illustrates how greed can get out of control. He came from the slums of Calcutta, so came from absolutely nothing, and went on to become the CEO of McKinsey, which is a huge consultancy firm. He was worth about 100 million, a staggering amount of wealth to most of us. And then an opportunity arose. So he got wind of the fact, I believe it was Warren Buffett was going to go ahead and buy a piece of Goldman Sachs, I think it was at the time. And so what he did was he went and bought more shares, which he knew would go up in value because of what was about to take place. He made $17 million from that, so well done, Gupta. He went from 100 to 117 million, but of course he went straight to jail immediately after, because that is enormously illegal what he did. It illustrates well that people just often don't know when enough is enough. What's even more bizarre is he clearly didn't learn his lesson either, because he was quoted on his release from prison as saying, "Okay, this thing unjustly destroyed my reputation. That's only troubling if I am so attached to my reputation. So he's basically saying, oh well, it destroyed my reputation. I don't care. All I care about is money. Which, you know, unbelievable, you would say. Now, let's move on to growing your money. So these are lessons from Morgan's book that apply to growing your money. Lesson number 4 is all about compounding, and really it talks to the age-old adage, the old saying that time in the market beats time in the market. And ultimately, the more you put money into the market and the more you let it compound and you let the interest that you make on that money grow and add to the actual balance, the more and more money you will get. A good example is that 81.5 billion of Warren Buffett's net worth actually came after his 65th birthday. And it's just because he'd had money in the market for so long. Morgan talks about the fact that Warren started investing, you know, in his early teens, which is when most of us are out playing on our bikes, playing football, and, you know, we're not even thinking about investing our money. And it just shows that time is really what's going to have the biggest impact on growing your money. The 5th lesson that I took away from this book is that you don't need to make fantastic or amazing decisions with your money, but what you really need to do is avoid terrible decisions that will ruin you. So this point really spoke to me because I'm often constantly over analyzing investments and trying to decide which is the best one, which is going to give me the best return. Morgan talks a lot about survival when it comes to money. So he says, don't go broke, you know, chasing enormous returns. Don't try and get more and more and squeeze extra returns and, you know, try and get 10%, 11, 12, 13, keep going. If you're getting, you know, 5%, but it means that you're not going to lose all your money, your house, you know, and just completely ruin your life, then stick with, you know, the 5%. You shouldn't just be investing for the sake of investing and constantly pouring money into investments just so we don't have, you know, cash in the bank. You probably heard this term, cash is trash, gets thrown around quite a lot. And Morgan actually offers a different view on this. He says, if that cash in the bank means that you don't panic sell your investments and sell everything at a loss, then actually having some cash is a good thing. Which again, this really spoke to me because the conventional wisdom is don't ever leave cash sitting around, always put it to use. But it does give you security, and it means that if investments go down, you don't feel like you have to just suddenly sell everything. In the book, Morgan uses an example, and he uses 3 people, Sue, Jim, and Tom. So let's say these 3 are all saving £1 a month from 1900 to 2019. So let's take Sue first, and let's imagine that Sue invests into the stock market, whether everyone is panicking about a recession, if they're saying there's a bubble, if they're saying things are overpriced. Sue just doesn't listen to the negativity, and also she doesn't listen to the hype. You know, well done, Sue. She doesn't buy into the hype either. She just puts her money in constantly, whether things are up, down, sideways, whatever is going on, and she just leaves it there. Now let's talk about Jim. So Jim puts money in when there's no recession. Then he hears, you know, there's talk on the news, there might be a recession coming, so he pulls it all back out. He leaves it in cash, you know, he just keeps that money in cash. And then when he thinks the recession is over, he quickly puts all his money back in. And now we'll move on to Tom. Tom is not so sure he believes there'll be a recession, so he leaves his money in, and then the recession actually hits. So then he takes his money out once it's been, you know, a couple of months of recession. So he's a bit late, you know, didn't act as fast as Jim. Then the recession ends, but Tom isn't so sure. So Tom sits on the sidelines. He says, well, I'm going to make sure this recession is definitely over. And then again, a few months have passed. The recession is definitely over. So he puts his money back in. So who ends up with the most money overall? Sue finishes up with £435,551, Jim with £257,386, and Tom with £234,476. So ultimately it shows that risk doesn't get you ahead, and also that the ultimate strategy is just to leave your money in. Let it compound, give it time in the market. The final summary is don't do anything incredibly risky that's going to completely wipe you out. This actually, spoke to me a lot. I've been doing some investing in crypto recently. Some people plowed their money in, chasing huge returns. And sometimes, I do think, I was too conservative with that. But at the same time, it meant that I didn't risk complete ruin if things happen to go the other way. And really, something else will always come along. Personally, I value a good night's sleep. With a puppy and a toddler running around, I need my sleep more than I want to chase a little bit of a slightly higher return on my money. Okay, so now that you've got your money, you're growing your money, the final section is how do you hold on to that money? And so the sixth lesson that I took from Morgan's book is that ultimately freedom is what truly makes people happy. So, fancy cars, watches, bigger houses, these things don't make people happy. What makes them happy is being able to wake up and decide what they do with their day. Their time is entirely their own, so they can go and spend the day working if they want to, writing, running, reading, whatever they choose to do with their time. Studies in happiness show us that this is the fundamental ingredient. So you could be earning an enormous wage, but if it's at a really stressful job and you have no control over your time, it's still not going to make you happy. Lesson number 7 was all about being reasonable with your investing decisions rather than trying to be coldly rational. I really like this advice because a lot of traditional investment advice just requires you to be this completely cold, rational robot, and it's just not possible. We're human beings with emotions, and Morgan talks a lot about just be reasonable with your investments and your financial decisions. And ultimately, that's the most sustainable because if it's reasonable, we're actually going to be able to adhere to it and to follow through on it. The 8th and final lesson is all about how everything comes at a price. And this is a really interesting way of looking at investing. So we don't hesitate to pay a fee for dinners, cars, holidays. We have no issue with that. But we don't like paying a fee when it comes to investing. And I'm not talking about a financial advisor or paying a fee in an app that you use. He talks about seeing financial markets, so the stock market, so your investments going up and down, as that's just the fee. That's the price of entry. So there's going to be ups, downs, but as long as overall you're up, well, then that is the fee that you pay. That's the fee associated with investing your money. And I think this is a fantastic way to look at it when, for example, with everything that's been going on, pandemic, the war in the Ukraine, you'll see the stock market drop. And I think this mental shift around investing is really key. Morgan actually uses the example of Disneyland. He says you have to pay a fee to visit and be entertained at Disneyland, but sometimes it rains at Disneyland, And so what he's saying here is that really you have to take the rough with the smooth. Thanks for watching this video all about the book that changed my financial life. If you have other books that you'd be interested in seeing me review, then please do leave a comment below. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it. Of course, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, and I'll see you in the next one.